Okay, in this session we are going to look at the theory of 2023 government. So we are going to look at the points and how they are supposed to be answered. So let's look at the question number 1, which says identify 5 functions of government as an agent of the state. This question tests your knowledge on government as a process of governing under the functions of government. And what are these functions of government? Number 1, and the most important function of government is government protects lives and property. That is the number 1, the chief reason for establishment of government. And when you talk about protect lives and property, government does this through law enforcement agencies. So that is why every government establishes law enforcement agencies to enforce the law, to make sure that lives and property of the people are always protected. That is why you see the police, you see the armed forces, you see agencies like NDLEA, you see agencies like NAFDAC that are playing a good role to make sure that we don't die by what we eat or take. And the rest of them. So government protects lives and property, and they do this by setting up law enforcement agencies to enforce those laws. Then number 2 function of government is maintenance of law and order. Government maintains law and order by ensuring that there is peace at all time. Anywhere there is an incident that can lead to breakdown of law and order, there must be the presence of government to make sure that there is peace, there is law, there is order, that things proceed peacefully the way things ought to be. Then government promotes national interest. What we mean by national interest, we are referring to the goals and objectives of the country. In the conduct of external relationship, government wants to ensure that the goals of the nation, of the state, is being protected and being achieved, even in its internal conduct within each territory. The government ensures that the goals that for which the state is established, which is the benefits it must gain, is being realized. So government protects national interest. Then government protects and preserves the national sovereignty. Remember, sovereignty refers to the supreme power of a state to conduct its affairs without any form of external intervention. So the government protects the state against any form of external encroachment, external influence that may undermine the territorial integrity, the sovereignty. We are referring to something like colonization or invasion of a state by another state or another external force. So government protects the state, protects and maintains the national sovereignty of the state. Then another function of government is lawmaking. That is, the government makes rules and regulations through a body called the legislature, or at times through delegated legislature. Those things are to govern the conduct of people in the society, to govern the conduct between the government and the people, the society, to make sure that the society is always comfortable for people. Then government is also responsible for policy formulation. When we talk about policy formulation, this is usually done by the executive arm of government. Policy formulation is about coming up with ideas to address the perennial problems of the state. It could be that the country is going through economic recession or having security challenges like insurgency. It is the government, the responsibility of government to come up with ideas, programs, implement them to make sure that these problems are being tackled. Another function of government is policy and law implementation. That is, to put any policy, any program of government into effect, to make sure it's being carried out, to make sure that people get to comply with this policy, to make sure that the policy realizes its aim. That is implementation of policies by the government. And the government does this through the public servants, the public service. That is why government establishes ministries and agencies to help to carry out any policy that the government has made. Then another function of government is government provides national leadership. That is to make sure that as a group, or of course the state is a group, the state is a society. Of course, it requires leadership to guide the people. So it is the duty of government to provide leadership for the nation, for the country, and make sure that the things proceed in an organized way, in such a way that people can look at it and know that there is somebody actually conducting and piloting the affairs of the society. Then the government is responsible for protecting lives, the rights of citizens and even non-citizens in a state. The government does this through the judicial arm of government, where those whose rights are violated can go to retrieve justice, to get justice for right being violated. So government does this, and even through the law enforcement agencies, to make sure that they protect citizens against the violation of their rights. Another function of government is it protects the state against external aggression or external attack. The government does this by setting up the armed forces. That is, the armed forces divided into three. We have the Army, Navy, the Air Force. The government maintains this and even put them at the border to make sure that the state is being protected against external aggression. That is why whenever there is any attempt to attack the state, even internal insurgency that is beyond the scope of the internal police, the government uses the military to quell all these kind of aggressions against the state. Then another function of government is it ensures the welfare of the people. Example, the government provide care for the aged. That is why you have the homes for the aged people. You have a poverty alleviation scheme. You see palliatives for from the government to the people to ease the hardship people experience. Also, the government conducts the state's foreign policy. That is, government is responsible for conducting and organizing the relationship between the state and another state and even world or international organization. It's government that negotiates this relationship on behalf of the people, on behalf of the state. So that is why we see the government representing the state in international organizations like United Nations, African Union, European Union, and other international organizations. And even if there is anything that has to do with the conduct between one state, a state and another state, it is the government or its representative that will do that on behalf of the people. Government also administers justice and settles dispute. The arm of government that is responsible for doing this is the judiciary. If there is any dispute, any crisis, any disagreement, it could be between one individual and another. It could be between groups. It could be between a group and an individual, or even government, levels of government. So it is the judiciary, through the process of interpreting the laws, that will settle the dispute through its rulings whenever the parties go to court. So it is the function of government also to create an enabling environment for state institutions to function very well. When we talk about state institutions, we're talking about the public service. We're talking about government agencies. Government establishes its agencies through which they carry out all its activities, and also maintains those agencies, creating an enabling environment through right policies and providing the necessary facilities for these state institutions to work effectively. Then the government manages the economy of the state. That is why the destiny of the economy of any state is in the hand of the government. The government makes economic policies to boost the economy of the country. The government is responsible for preparing the budget of the country, and of course it must allocate the ones that will boost the economy of the state. So the government manages the economy of the state through its policy making function. Then the government provides employment opportunities. How does the government do this? The government does this by either through its agencies. Of course, people work in all the agencies of government that are called public servants. So these people, These agencies of government are employment opportunities to them. Government also creates an enabling environment that will attract foreign investors to invest in a country, and through that, people are employed into this investment. So government is responsible for employment opportunities so each citizens. Then the government provides essential services. Government does this creation of essential services through what we call public corporation, that is public enterprise, that is set up not to make profit but to actually provide essential services to the people at minimal rate or cost. So it is the government to provide these essential services like water, electricity, schools to the public, even health facilities, even mass media. That's why we have Nigerian Television Authority, which is one of the public corporations that provides essential services to the public. Another function of government is to provide civic and political education to each citizen. It is the responsibility of the government to provide civic education, that is, educate the citizens about the affairs of the state, educate the citizens to be responsible citizens, and government does this by one, inculcating it in the school curriculum to ensure that students that go through the school, citizens that go to school must gain this knowledge about governmental affairs, about the affairs of the state. And government also does this through the mass media, educating the people about its policies and programs. Then another function of government is ensuring there is national unity and cohesion. Now, government puts up different measures to make sure that in a country where you talk about a heterogeneous society like Nigeria, that there is unity at all times. Government does it through things like federal character, ensuring that the appointments and recruitment into the various establishments of government reflect the diversity of the country, equitable revenue allocation, and the rest of them, even rotation of political offices like the presidency. So these things are measures that government does, government puts in place to ensure that there is national unity. It is the duty of government to always ensure that there is unity in the state. So these are the chief functions of government. Let's look at question number 2. Question number 2 says, explain 5 factors. And remember, question number 1 is 15 marks and requires that you must explain each point. Question number 2 says, explain 5 factors that hamper the effective operation of the justice delivery system in justice delivery system. 15 marks, meaning that each point carries 3 marks, and therefore, like I've said initially, it is expected that you must throw more light, that is, explain every point you highlight. Now, the points expected of students to use is problem with judicial management and internal administration. Now, the administration of the judiciary itself has its challenges. The administration of the judiciary itself, because when you talk about justice delivery system, it is mostly dependent on the judicial arm of government. So the administration of the judiciary is not always, at its best. So the challenges the judiciary have, internal challenges that the judiciary has in its administration, in its management, actually affect justice delivery system. It could be bureaucratic bottleneck within its internal affairs, which can delay justice delivery, and that is why at times you see cases lingering for 10 years, 20 years, 5 years. So these things have a lot to do with internal administration of the judiciary. Then another problem of another factor that affects effective operation of justice delivery system is prevalent mechanism and procedure for court cases. Now, when you talk about this, you talk about filing of case, the procedure for filing case, the procedure for registering case, the procedure for preparing of court proceedings. All this procedure actually takes time and are cumbersome in most cases, and this thing affects justice delivery because it takes time. And of course, any victim of any circumstance, probably you're talking about infringement of human rights here, the victim expects that justice should be as quick as possible so that the victim can appreciate this. But this procedure actually makes things to take a lot of time. Then another problem that hampers the effective operation of justice delivery system is prevalence of favoritism, nepotism, and cronyism. Now, this thing has to do with, attempt to be biased to favor relatives, to favor friends, to favor people that, the judges are familiar with, or people that the law enforcement agencies are familiar with. The law enforcement agencies, especially in criminal cases, they are the ones to actually handle the prosecution, and in so doing at times, when their friends are involved or people that they know are involved, actually they may want to twist the case. They may not want to bring out the required evidence to actually nail the culprit. So at times favoritism affects justice delivery. They attempt to favor friends, they attempt to favor relatives or people that are known. Then inadequate law court is another factor affecting effective operation of justice delivery system. The courts employs, especially country like Nigeria, the number of courts is not adequate to handle all the cases in the country. So these are the reasons you have cases lingering for a very long time, because at times some courts have more cases than they can effectively handle, and of course you see delay in cases. Then another problem is inadequate legal officers. When we talk about inadequate legal officers, we're talking about judiciary. Members of the judiciary, at times a judge may have more than 50 cases in his hand. And how will he do that? So it means these things are possible because the judicial officers are not adequate enough to actually handle the cases that they have. So it takes time. So these things are affecting justice delivery system. Then also issues of conflict of interest can affect justice delivery. I illustrate a situation where a judge presiding over electoral matter as the husband of one of the parties involved in the case. Of course, there will be conflict of interest. So at times there is usually this conflict of interest. It may be a civil matter, and the judge or the magistrate to handle the matter is related to one of the parties, or as a friend or knew one of the parties and favorably disposed to one of the parties. So you see conflict of interest will come into the matter. Then also the executive interference and manipulation of the court processes. You will recall that it is the chief executive that appoints members of the Supreme Court, members of the judiciary, through the approval of the legislature. So at times, the executive uses its power to appoint and even to pay the salary of judicial officers. That is why, remember, during the time of Muhammad Buhari, when he wanted to grant autonomy to the judiciary, governors of the 36 states, most of them protested against it. They kicked against it. Now, they don't want the judiciary to be autonomous financially because they use that to actually interfere and manipulate and control the judiciary. So the judiciary faces the challenge of executive interference, and this executive interference favors the executive arm of government, especially when you bring up a case against the ruling party or the party in power. So the executive arm of government interference in courts and even in court cases and even the manipulation affects justice delivery system. People can't get the justice they deserve. Then corrupt judicial officer. officers, like the clerks, the registrars, the bailiffs, the judges. Whenever they are corrupt, that is, they are willing to receive bribe from the people, to receive bribe from the highest bidder, of course, justice can never be achieved, can never come out of such case. So there are cases where such things happen and these things affect justice delivery. And that is where you will see a judge call white black and they will rule on it because money has exchanged hands. So corrupt judicial officers hamper justice delivery system. Budgetary control and insufficient resource allocation for administration and training. The judiciary is not financially strong in terms of the budgetary allocation to the judicial arm of government is not enough for them to actually address or attend to the needs, the administrative needs of the judicial arm of government, and this also affects the justice delivery system. Then weak institutional protection for the operation of the judiciary also affect the justice delivery system. Then lack of ICT system and use of the system also affect the justice delivery because some of the judges, some of the justice system that are still dealing with analog. That is, some of them are still writing their cases, and when they write, they'll give to somebody to type. So we don't have this ICT compliance, adequate ICT compliance in the judicial system that they can use to handle their proceedings. And this actually affects justice delivery system because these are some of the bureaucratic bottlenecks that lead to delay in justice. Then another problem in justice delivery is inadequate infrastructure and equipment for the judiciary. The judiciary, they don't have enough infrastructure and equipment that they need to carry out their duties and functions. Then also public perception of the judiciary or the justice system actually affect justice delivery because of experience people had in the past. They feel that they cannot get justice, that justice is not possible. Justice is for the highest bidder. There is lack of public trust, and at times people now resort to taking laws into their own hands, and this affects justice delivery system. Then also delay in justice delivery system, delayed justice. Of course, they say justice delayed is justice denied. You can imagine a murder case that lingers for 20 years, 15 years. How will the victims feel? How will the bereaved feel? So it's another factor when there is prevalence of delay in justice delivery. Then high cost of obtaining justice, filing cases in the courts, prosecuting cases, following up cases, the service of lawyer, the high cost of justice delivery makes at times some people don't want to go through court process. They avoid it because of the high cost. So it affects justice delivery system. Of course, in such case, when people avoid it, justice will not be obtained. Then inability of the poor to access legal services. Now, when a poor man, they say that a poor man depends only on his God to provide his cases. When a poor man has a case and he needs to go to court, of course, he needs the service of a lawyer. The lawyer may call the amount the poor man has never seen in his life. And of course, a poor man's major preoccupation is how to eat. So in most cases, you see that the poor cannot get justice, except miraculously somebody decides to handle their case for them. But on their own, they cannot follow up their case. Then, poor conditions of service. We are talking about the judges are not adequately, the judicial officers are not adequately paid. And because they are not adequately paid, the tendency to compromise, to be corrupt, and to take bribe and twist justice is usually high. So a poor condition of service hampers the operation of justice delivery. Inadequate professional training for judicial officers. Of course, judicial officers, yes, they studied law, they have the experience. There's need for training and retraining and update. And of course, because they are not adequately paid, some of them cannot self-sponsor their training. There is need for government to always earmark funds for their training, and thereby they don't go for training. Of course, it will affect justice delivery because they may not be up to date in the conduct of their affairs. Then corrupt law enforcement agencies can affect justice delivery. Why we say corrupt law enforcement agencies can affect justice delivery is that when the law enforcement agencies that are supposed to prosecute criminal cases receive bribe and allow the culprit to go. We have seen cases where criminals escape from police custody. One wonders what happens. How will this person leave police custody? Somebody that is in cell escapes and he is the only one that left the police custody. Meaning that there's compromise somewhere. Money has exchanged hands. So when you have corrupt enforcement agencies, it affects justice delivery systems. So these are the factors that affect and hamper the effective operation of justice delivery system. Now let's look at the third question. The question says, highlight 5 factors that have contributed to the weakened governmental institutions in many West African states. 15 marks, of which each point is expected to be 5 marks. Now, some people will see these questions and be confused about it. But when you look at this question, you ask yourself, which governmental institution was taught? You see that what will come to your mind are institutions like the civil service, public operation, the local government. These are the governmental institutions you were taught. So when you look at it and look at their problems, you're there to the answer. Now, what are the factors that have contributed to the weakened government institutions? And we are talking about their problems. That's what we are talking about. Number one is inadequate funding for its operations. So budgetary allocations or the allocation or grants from the government to these governmental institutions like civil service, public corporation is not adequate for them to carry out the operations, to have the necessary facilities they need to carry out the administrative activities. So it affects them, it weakens the institution. Then inadequate and poor logistics. You find out that they don't have the necessary facilities like transport facilities, ICT facilities, some gadgets that they need, logistic facilities they need to carry out the operation. At times they are lacking, and where they have, you see that they are having the old ones. That is why you see in some government establishments, some are still using typewriter. When we are in an age where offices should have computer system. So logistic issue, then poor and inadequate staffing. At times they don't have enough staff or especially qualified staff, because people are not very much attracted to government establishment like they are attracted to multinational corporations. So it affects them in terms of staffing. Then poor conditions of service. Yes, it's government work, some people like it, but the condition of service, they are not very much paid like their counterpart at the private sector. Example, a banker earns far much more than a civil service. Then you begin to look at people working in multinational corporations. So their conditions of service is not adequate. They don't receive enough pay, enough allowance that will actually meet what life demands. So it's a problem. Then, and of course, this thing affects them because some of them resort to doing other businesses, which is against the code of conduct of such institutions. Then corruption, nepotism, and favoritism. Corruption in the sense that these public servants actually take bribes from the public before they can discharge their official duty. Favoritism and nepotism, in the sense that appointments, at times promotion, even recruitment into this establishment are in most cases based on who you know, your friend, relative, your connections. So the people are not, in most cases, given based on merit. So it affects and weakens this institution. Then negative attitude to work is another factor. And negative attitude to work, we are talking about a situation where the public servants or as workers in these institutions regard it as a government work that does not demand seriousness. So that is why you see cases of lateness to work, absent from work, attending to business instead of to work, leaving whenever you like instead of the official closing time. So this is negative attitude to work. Then misappropriation and the embezzlement of public funds is another factor that affect this government institution. Funds allotted, because they say that they're having problem of inadequate funds. Funds allotted to them are misappropriated. They are embezzled by few people, those in control of the fund. They embezzle, then they use it for their own private intentions and not for the institutions. And of course, it affects and weakens the institution. Then we have political interference. The executive arm of government does not give the public service or this government institution free hand to run their affairs. They usually interfere by deciding on how they must do things their way, and even in appointments. You see some members of the executive using their name to appoint some people and even promote some people in the public service. Then also we have political patronage. Now, these governmental institutions are seen as a place where people that can be used to, give people political patronage, that is, favor those that have actually supported them during an election. You see a government deciding, okay, I'm employing your children, I'm employing this because you actually supported me during election. So it weakens those institutions. Then you see problem of overstaffing. Now, because some people are given appointment, are recruited into this institution without the institution declaring vacancy, without the institution calling for recruitment, just because some people have the power to actually appoint people into the institution and they become permanent workers of this institution. So they overuse it to the point that these governmental institutions have more staff than they actually need. So it's a problem. Then we have misplaced priorities, in the sense that at times some of these government institutions focus on things that don't matter so much, focus on things that should not be their main concern. They do that instead of on things that should be their major concern, at times based on the interests of the politician that is heading that particular ministry or institution. There we have shift in focus and assigned mandate. At times they leave their focus or what is assigned to them and face another thing. Example, some people perceive it that the what do you call it, at times it seems that there was a time EFCC in Nigeria focused more on political enemies of the ruling party than their main mandate. So it affects them. Then we also have poor policy direction of this institution. The direction of the policy are negative. Then inconsistency in policy implementation. They are not consistent in how they carry out the policies of government, because they are saddled with the responsibility of implementing government policies. Then we also have the problem of inadequate research into organizational strategies. They don't adequately do research to actually discover the right way to carry out their operations and their strategies. Then they also have the problem of non-existent competition. They don't compete. Government agencies don't compete with anybody. So they don't have the need to upgrade. They don't have the need to find a better way to do things. They always do it the same way. The same way they did it even centuries ago. That's the same way they want to do it in another century. Then poor evaluation and assessment of the operations of the institution. Now, there's poor mechanism, if there is any, poor mechanism of assessing and evaluating this institution to check their performance and even to appraise the staff of this institution. So it affects the effectiveness of this institution. Then we have poor leadership as a problem. Those that head it, some are not visionary leaders that are actually meant to carry and other people and institutions along. Then also inadequate training. Many of them don't go for a refresher course, and at times the government does not institutionalize compulsory training or sponsor trainings of these institutions to make their staff more effective. Then also weak application of the Constitution and other laws is another problem they have. Then the existence of a compromised media is also a problem to these institutions, because at times compromised media, especially media coming from the opposition party, can always paint them black or give the public the wrong image of these government organizations. Then political instability is another problem, factor affecting this organization, these government institutions. Political instability, in this, we are talking about frequent change of government. Frequent change of government affect them in the sense that public institutions may adapt to the policies and programs of this government. In the course of carrying it out, another government can come and scrap the entire policies and programs, and the public servant need to adjust to the new government and its style. So it affects them. Then we have bureaucracy and red tapeism, what we call administrative bottleneck. These institutions actually they have rules and regulations that govern every step-by-step activity, and of course the staff are meant to follow these rules. These rules, what we call routine, does not allow them or do not allow them to actually attend to emergency when there is need to attend to emergency. So it also affects them. They can't attend to emergency, they can't take quick decisions because they need to follow that step-by-step routine given to them. So these are the factors that have contributed to weakening government institutions in West African states. Now let's look at the question number 4, which says, in what 5 ways does political socialization assist in democratic process of a state? Here we are talking about the importance of political socialization. Now, what are the importance of political socialization? Number 1, it helps in transmission of political values and norms to the younger generation. Remember, political socialization, you politically socialize into the culture, political culture of the state. And the political culture of the state refers to the political norms and values of that state. So it enables the transmission of this political culture into the younger generation of a state. It encourages political participation. When people are politically socialized, they see need to be involved in the affairs of their state, and this will in turn make them to take adequate participation in the affairs of their state. It also instills political values of patriotism and nationalism. Yes, when people are politically socialized, the spirit of nationalism and the patriotism, love and identity and a sense of belonging and deep feelings for their country will follow, and they will walk in loyalty to their country. Then it also helps in political recruitment. Now, what we're talking about in political recruitment, it helps a person to be politically educated to the point that the person can be a political leader, or person can be seen as reliable enough to take up some political mandates for the state. Then it promotes political education and enlightenment. Of course, political socialization itself is political education and enlightenment. So it promotes that enlightenment. It promotes interest in the governance of their state. It makes people, by being politically socialized, that is educated, that is socialized into political culture, it makes people to take interest in the governance of their state, want to know what is happening in the government, want to know the activities of the government. Then it helps in the formation of public opinion. Yes, when political socialization, the extent to which somebody is politically socialized or educated, determines how the person expresses his view on public issues and matters. Then it helps in the development of political culture in the state. Political culture, as political way of life of a particular state, is being maintained through political socialization. You continue to socialize and educate people about their political culture. And it ensures responsibility and accountability in governance. When citizens are politically socialized, they participate even to the point that they begin to make demands on their government. And when governments see that people are conscious and make demands on them, and they participate, of course, it will make the government invariably to be accountable in its activities, so that it will be able to convince the people to vote for them in another election. Then it also inculcates political traditions in successive generations. That is, it inculcates political culture in successive generation. From generation to generation, you maintain the same political culture where they are still relevant. Then it also enhances legitimacy of political institutions and the state. It makes, when people are socialized into their political systems, people are socialized into how their political systems operate. And of course, when they are socialized into how their political system is and how their political system operates, it helps in legitimatizing them, these political institutions and political systems of the state. Because people, whenever they see it as the way they are being socialized, they will always acknowledge and support that political system. Then it creates awareness of political institutions and processes. Of course, when people are politically socialized, they become aware of political institutions of their state, the political system, the electionary system, the electoral processes, the history of their state. And of course, it enhances critical thinking and evaluation. When people are politically socialized, especially when you study government, studying of government is political socialization itself. Of course, it gives you critical thinking, ability to evaluate issues, ability to evaluate government policies, ability to evaluate political systems, ability to evaluate even political processes and constitutional development in the past. So this makes the person to have a critical thinking way of looking at issues in the society. So these are the ways political socialization assists in the democratic process of the state. Remember, this question is 15 marks and demands that you must explain. That is why I threw light on some of these questions. Now, question number 5 says, outline 5 reasons for which it is important for a state to have efficient local government system. In other words, this question is testing your knowledge on the burdens of local government, that is, reasons for the creation of local government. Now, the reasons: 1, it promotes, local government promotes governance at the local government, at the local level. Remember, local government is the government at the grassroots or local government, local level. So it promotes governance. Let the people at the local government experience the art of governance, the governmental processes at their level. Then it helps in the mobilization of local and material resources for the development of the state. So the local government is at the best level to, actually tap from the material and the human resources at the local level, which will in turn be used for the development of the local area. Then it also assists in mobilizing human resources for development. The local government is also created to mobilize human resources. At times, this mobilization can be human resources that will work at local government secretariat, human resources that will be the local government chairman, human resources that will occupy local government positions, and human resources that can give advice to the local government, of which this also help in the development of the local area. And our local government identifies and advertises the economic potential of the area to attract investors. Yes, the local government is there to actually make people, especially potential local investors, to understand the potentials of a particular areas for them to invest in these areas. It assists in the maintenance of law and order at the local government, at the local level. Remember, because it is a government, it has the responsibility of maintaining law and order. So the local government maintains law and order. That is, ensure that there is peace. There is no breakdown of law and order at the local level. Then it also creates employment. Of course, because this is a decentralized government, people work in local government secretariat as their job. We have the local government chairman, we have the supervisory councillors, we have the councillors at the local government. So and also, of course, there are people who make supplies to the local government when the local government want to carry out any project. And of course, these things are jobs. So it creates employment opportunities for the people at the local level. It also generates revenue for local development through levies, through rates, through even going into businesses. So it does investment. So it generates revenue, and this revenue is plowed back into the local area for its development. Then it trains future political leaders through grassroots politics. Some politicians at the national level today started their political journey from the local level. So the local level, one of the importance of local government is that they should be able to train future political leaders, because they give them opportunity to start at that level before they now graduate to the national level. Then it promotes political participation and governance. Yes, when you have a decentralized system where you have local government, political participation is promoted. People participate at the national level, state level, and the local level. And it boosts the ability of people to take part, because they have where they can take part in the affairs of the state. Then it serves as a bridge linking the local people to the central government. That it serves as a connecting link between the local or channel of information between the local people and the central government. The local people channel their grievances, their needs to the local government, while the local government takes it to the central level. Then the central government implements some of these policies through the local government, making it to get to the local people. Then also, it assists in legitimatization of political system by promoting participation and also support from the local populace. It also encourages the self-help spirit or local initiative, so that what we mean by this is that it encourages people to look inwards, what they can generate from the local level, how they can tap the resources from the local level, because local government has what we call internally generated revenue. And this internally generated revenue is achieved by sourcing funds from the sourcing for materials, sourcing for resources at the local level, and use them to generate fund for the local level. Then also, it draws the attention of the central government to the pressing needs of the people. It is the duty of the local government to relate to the central government what the people actually need. so that the central government will address them, because there are some problems at the local government that are beyond the ability of the local government. Such problems, the local government relate to the central government. Then it explains government policies to the local people. And of course, the central government uses the local government to actually educate people on its policies and the programs. Then also the local government assists in national integration, especially in a heterogeneous society like Nigeria, where there is need to use the local government to still preserve customs and traditions. Then it also provides for conflict resolution mechanisms at the local area. Yes, local government plays a role. That is in a conflict resolution. That is why you have customary courts at the local government level that will help to resolve issues bordering on cultures and traditions of the people. Then it reduces the workload of the central government. Now, with local government, the central government will not be saddled with all the problems at the local areas. It delegates these problems or devolves this power to attend these problems to the local government, who cannot attend to this problem, while the central government will focus on only national matters. Then the local government promotes efficiency in governance. Efficiency in governance, which is achieved through decentralization of powers. The central government focus on national matters, the local government focus on local matters. It promotes efficiency in governance. Then also the local government provides essential services at the local level. The local government are involved in provision of water to the people, provision of roads to the people, provision of even health care to the people, even schools to the people. So these things are some essential services that local government provides to the people. Then it shows rapid response in times of emergency. They respond faster to the local people when there is emergency than the central government. The central government is far from the people because local government is made to bring the government nearer to the people. Then it enhances effective decentralization. Effective decentralization has to do with sharing of government into levels of government so that the local people can have a government that is close to them. Then it assists in addressing the basic needs of the people at the local level. The local government assists in doing this. Now let's look at question. The next question, which is question number 6, which says, explain 5 reasons for which the study of nationalism and nationalistic activity is important to the democratic development of a state. You know, we studied nationalism, and why is it important that nationalism has been studied? Number 1, it enables us to know our patriots and nationalist leaders. That is why when you studied nationalism in Nigeria, names like Herbert Macaulay, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Fobafemi Awolowo, Tafawa Balewa, Asela Akintola, this Ahmad Bello, these people that helped to fight for the independence of our country I mentioned. So in studying nationalism, you get to know some of these people. It helps us to appreciate their contributions to the nationalist struggle. That is, we appreciate, we understand, it makes us to understand how these people went out of their way, the nationalists went out of their way to actually struggle for our country. Then it helps us to know their input, the input of these nationalists in constitutional reforms that assisted in the attainment of independence. If you study government, you see how those people played a crucial role in constitutional development, how they pushed for change of constitution, how they pushed for even the independence constitution. Before the independence constitution, you see the London Constitutional Conference of 1957, you see these things were attended by our nationalists, and they made their demands. You saw the conference of Lagos Conference of 1958. You saw how the nationalists made their demands for the independence of the country. So we saw it enables us to understand this. It also enables us to understand how the nationalists use the mass media to mobilize people for a common cause, that is to participate in the affairs of the state and also to achieve the independence. So we saw how you saw about Macaulay Daily News, you saw Western Pilot, you saw some of these the pilots, you saw some of these nationalist media and how they were used to actually mobilize people for this common cause, which is participation of the people in the affairs of the state and eventual independence. Another importance is to identify and appreciate the roles of the various political parties associated with the nationalist struggle. In nationalism, you see, you were exposed to the activities of Nigerian National Democratic Party, Nigerian Youth Movement, their roles, and how some of the National Council of Nigeria and Cameroon, Action Group, Northern People's Congress, Northern Element Progressive Union. You see how these parties, most of them has it in the objective to achieve independence for Nigeria. So it helps us to see the rules of political party. Then it helps us to identify and appreciate the rules of trade unions and pressure group to the nationalist struggle. In nationalism, we saw the role of Nigerian Labour Congress in 1945 that led to strike, and how it contributed in enabling people to participate, especially the black, to participate in the affairs of their state. It also helps us to understand how nationalist activities led to the infrastructural development. Through their demands, the colonial masters started putting up some infrastructure like roads, like water, like electricity in our country. It also enables us to know and understand the various strategies adopted by nationalists in dealing with colonial rules. How are the strategies, use of media, use of political party, use of labor union to actually confront our colonial masters. It also enabled people to know what nationalism meant to those who participated in it and its impact on the present generation. It also builds social cohesion. When we see how all these people, the nationalists, work for the independence of all of us, it helps us to come together as one. It also makes us to have this one spirit that all these people, despite the fact that they came from diverse ethnic groups, they still work for the independence of us as one. Then finally, it helps to build national consciousness, that is awareness, sense of identity as a member of a state. So this is number 6. Now we are going to look at number 7. And the question number 7 says, question number 7A says, what is political leadership? Now, when we talk about political leadership, of course, leadership is the process or ability of guiding, directing, organizing, leading a group of people in order to achieve a common goal. Now, that is leadership. But when you talk about political leadership, it must take place within the context of the state. So it's the ability or process of guiding, directing, leading a group of people to achieve a common goal in the state. So, and when you're looking at political leadership, you're looking at people like the president, vice president, the senate president, governors, and the rest of them. Okay, now let's look at 7B. which says identify 4 qualities of a good political leader. There are many, of course. This question is 12 marks, each one 3 marks, meaning it calls for explanation. Now, the qualities: one, the leader must be visionary. That is, the leader must have a vision of where they are going. The leader must have a framework. The leader must have a goal. Visualize it where he is leading the state to, members of the state. It could be vision about the economy of the state, vision about the security of the state. Some of the issues in the state must have a vision of how he wants the state to be. Secondly, the leader must be firm, fair, and decisive. That is, fair in the sense must have good sense of judgment on matters, national matters, must be firm and also be decisive, not somebody that does not have any decision or difficult in taking decision, must be firm and decisive. Then the leader also must be approachable and accessible. This is somebody, we are talking about somebody that people can freely walk up to, people that freely can air their mind, and also we give feedback to. Not accessibility does not mean that everybody can troop into the leader's office. We are talking about somebody who is transparent enough, we can see what he's doing, give feedback, and the person can actually respond to the feedback given by the citizens. Then also the leader must lead by example. A leader, we expect citizens should not be corrupt. It's expected that the leader should not be corrupt. The leader should not lie. The leader should have the moral qualities that he expects the citizens to have. Then it must be person of high integrity. That is somebody who does not compromise his or her moral standard for whatever reason. Then this person must be knowledgeable. Yes, of course, a leader, a political leader, will not have the knowledge of all the affairs, but must be knowledgeable in being able to organize human resources to achieve whatever he wants. And he must have good knowledge on how to manage people, how to bring out the best from people, how to use people to achieve his goal. That is why it is expected that, let's say, a president should be able to get the best for each ministry in terms of appointment of ministers. Should be able to get the best, know who should be the best for that, and give the right person to head each particular department of government. Then must have the ability to inspire others, should be able to motivate others to be the best. Then must empathize with others, that is, be able to put others, put his or herself in the shoe of others, to know how they feel, so that he will be cautious about some of the policies that he or she will enact. Then she will have good sense of judgment in any matter, because a political leader must have different matters to treat and also to make policies on them. And at times there could be conflict of interest on issues coming up to him. He must have good sense of judgment to know the right course, and such right course must be objectively arrived at. Then he must be able to build good team spirit. Should be able to, a political leader must work with a team, must be able to have a team that he works with. Shouldn't depend only on himself. He should be able to work as a team and know that the governance is not about him. He is the chief executive, he is the leader, he organizes other people to achieve things with other people. Then there must be good communication skill. A leader should be able to communicate effectively, communicate his vision, communicate his approaches, communicate what he is doing. Then must be innovative, that is, full of ideas, must be creative, have new things to offer. Then a leader must be able to accept responsibility for his or her action, shouldn't take excuse, shouldn't push responsibilities to others, but rather take responsibility for whatever happens under his watch, to say, yes, I take responsibility for this. Then a good leader should have emotional intelligence, be able to observe, feel the atmosphere, feel how people feel, observe it, and be able to notice how people feel about what is going on in the country. And finally, a good leader must be diplomatic, have that is good negotiation skill in a positive manner, in a mild manner. Be able to achieve what you want in your negotiation, but without following a forceful way to actually achieve that goal you want to achieve in negotiating with people. Of course, a leader needs to negotiate with trade union and their interest, pressure group and their interest, negotiate with outsiders, other countries, and also their interests, and at every point be able to project the national interest, and such requires diplomacy skill in negotiation. So these are the qualities of a good political leader. Now let's look at the next question number 8, which says, in what 5 ways is diplomacy important to the development of Nigeria? 15 marks, meaning that each point requires explanation. Diplomacy has to do with the relationship with other countries, interaction with other countries. Now, 1, diplomacy promotes cordial ties with other countries, that is friendly ties, friendly relations with other countries, that is you work friendly with other countries, relate in a cordial way, free of any kind of hostility, relating with other countries. Diplomacy, which has to do with international relations, protects citizens abroad. When you relate with a country, establish embassy in another country, your diplomatic mission has the responsibility of protecting your citizens in that particular state. That is why when citizens have issues or security issues in another state, most of them are likely to go to the diplomatic mission of their country to seek refuge. So it protects citizens outside their country. It helps in negotiation and international bargaining. It is the diplomatic mission or the government in its international relations have to negotiate with other countries, negotiate on how to type maybe joint economic resources, negotiate on how to maybe joint military force, negotiate on terms of relationship, negotiate even maybe borrowing, taking loan from another country, and many things that they negotiate. Negotiate even release of prisoners of war. These things are part of what countries benefit. A country like Nigeria benefits in diplomacy. Then it promotes our national interest abroad. Of course, one factor that actually motivates a country or determines a country's foreign policy like Nigeria is national interest. That is the goal of a nation. Now, diplomatic relations, that is interaction with other countries, helps Nigeria to actually achieve its national goals outside the country. Then it advertises high economic potentials of the country abroad. Now, diplomacy makes other countries to understand the economic potential, the economic resources of a particular country. It makes them to understand these resources so that other countries can begin to invest in their country, in Nigeria, and begin to come into Nigeria to also tap our resources. So it helps. Then another one is it enhances the image of the country. In course of relating with other countries, Nigeria, of course, will project its image, positive image abroad, and this brings about positive image of Nigerians abroad. Then it gathers intelligence information. Now, diplomacy helps to gather some intelligent, useful intelligence information. Now, when you're talking about intelligence information, we are talking about security information, very important security information. It can be security information that has to do with impending attack on Nigeria. It could be security information on impending attack on citizens of Nigeria in another country. It could be any other form of security information. So diplomatic relations help in gathering this security information. Then diplomatic relations also help to report on developments of interest in other countries, and also you implement foreign policy directives and programs through diplomacy, because every country, Nigeria has this foreign policy, and these foreign policies are implemented effectively through diplomacy. Then it promotes cultural exchange. Nigeria exchanges its culture and even learn the culture of other countries through diplomacy. That's the interaction with other countries. So you see some cultures that are dominant in a particular country being imported into Nigeria, and you see that of Nigeria. You see people dressed like Nigerians outside Nigeria. Then also you see it helps in conflict resolution. Diplomacy, that is interaction with other countries, helps in conflict resolution. If you look at the conflict of Nigeria, which is not violent, of course, the disagreement between Nigeria and Cameroon over Bakassi Peninsula was settled amicably by the International Court of Justice at Hague. So it was settled because of diplomacy. So diplomacy helps in amicable settlement of disputes without resorting to hostility by countries. Then, of course, it fosters world peace in the interest of the country. One of the major essence of diplomacy is to promote world peace and security, to make sure that there is reduced hostility between and among countries. So these are the points. Now let's look at question number 9, which says, outline 5 positive political impacts colonial administration had on West African states leading to statehood. We are talking about positive impacts of colonialism here, and it's 15 marks, which means that each point calls for explanation. Number 1 is the creation of states. Example: there was no country or no state called Nigeria until colonialism. It was colonialism that was able to amalgamate all these places that we call Nigeria today, and they became Nigeria a country. So Nigeria is a creation of colonialism. Many West African countries are creation of colonialism. They put different people together and call them a state. That's one of the achievements. Then another impact is creation of national identity. That is making group of people that were diverse, different, to be able to identify themselves as one, having the same sense of goal, having the same sense of objective, having the same sense of nationhood. Colonialism was able to achieve this. Another impact of colonialism is formation of political parties. What is the origin of political parties in Nigeria? It is through colonial constitution, Hugh Clifford Constitution of 1922, which now gave the impetus for Herbert Macaulay, the father of Nigerian nationalism, to form the first political party in Nigeria, which is the Nigerian National Democratic Party in 1923. Other political parties were formed during colonial era. This is credit to colonialism. Another impact of colonialism is formation of trade union. Now, colonial administrators began to employ Nigerians into the public service, and from there, our public service, Nigerian public servants formed a group, Nigerian Labour Congress. From there, they started agitating for their welfare, for their interests. So it is an impact of colonialism. The establishment of the press. Press started with colonialism in Nigeria. Remember, after 1922 Constitution, Herbert Macaulay created the first political party, and on top of it created first nationalist media, that is Lagos Daily News, which was used against the colonialists. It also led to, colonialism also led to the creation of bureaucratic institutions. That is, our public institutions, our public service owes its origin to colonialism. They were created by colonial administrators. Yes, at a stage we started creating agencies, but the origin of our public service was the colonial administration. That was why there was a time our nationalism was about participation in the affairs of government, and also there was a time we had Africanization scheme during the Macpherson Constitution, where they say that any white that retires must be replaced by an African. So our public institution owes its origin to colonialism. Then creation of legislative institution owes its origin to colonialism. If you recall, Clifford Constitution created a legislative council. Richard Constitution of 1946 created a central legislative council. Macpherson Constitution created House of Representatives, which is still in vogue today. What do you call it? Independence Constitution created the National Assembly, Senate, and House of Representatives. So legislative institutions were created both at regional level, were created by colonialism. Executive institution was also created by colonialism. That's another impact. If you look at Clifford Constitution created Executive Council. Richard's Constitution of 1946 maintained the Executive Council. Macpherson Constitution called it the Council of Ministers. So our Executive Council owes its origin to colonialism. Then we also have, it created the judicial institution. Our court system, our judiciary, owes its origin to colonialism. We didn't have court. We used our traditional ways to handle disputes during pre-colonial era. But from colonial era, they introduced the court system, which we inherited from them. The introduction of elective principle is one of the, and representative government is one of the impacts of colonialism. We never knew about how to elect. It was not part of our system to elect people, but election was introduced in Nigeria by colonial administration. If you recall, for the first time in history, elective in principle was introduced by the then Clifford Constitution of 1922. It was from there elections started in Nigeria. So it is to their credit. Also, constitutional rule was introduced by colonialism. We never knew anything called constitution. Constitution was introduced by colonialism, starting from 1922 Clifford Constitution to 1946 Richard's Constitution, the Macpherson Constitution, and up till now, at the stage we started making our own constitution. We are using our own constitution, no longer colonial constitution. But of course, the colonialism introduced this constitution to us. Then colonialism also contributed to political participation. Yes, they gave us room at the state to participate in the affairs of our state through constitutional development and some of the provisions of this constitution, legislative council, house of assembly, house of chief, elective principles, allowed us to form political parties. Those things boost political consciences and participation. So it's one of the impacts of colonial administration. Then colonial administrations, another impact is that it led to emergence of nationalist movement and nationalist leaders. Now, through agitation against some practices of our colonial masters, we started having nationalists, those that fought against colonial rule and, of course, helped us to achieve independence. So these are the impacts of colonial administration in West African states. Now, let's look at the last question. The last question says, identify 5 mistakes committed in democratic governance that gave cause for the military to intervene in politics. What were the mistakes that our democratic governance made that led military to come in? So, causes of military rule. 1 is slow response to threats. If you recall, in a major political crisis, we had some threats, some political crises, which the chief of them is the Western election crisis of 1965. the breakdown of law and order, which was very almost impossible for the civilian government to contain. From there, we saw military intervention. So slow response, they could not respond, and they were slow to responding to threats. Also, constitutional crisis gave rise to military rule. Constitutional crisis, like some of the crisis example, you talk about the constitutional crisis that we had in 1979 election. Is a constitutional crisis. You talk about also constitutional crisis we had even in the 60s that led us to colonial rule. So we had some constitutional crisis. Then the civilian also abused power. They became dictatorial. So they abused power even through corruption and abuse of office. It led the military to take over. Then manipulation of the judiciary and the judicial system. People could not get justice because the judiciary was manipulated by the civilian administration. Another reason is corruption in government and the government officials. You see embezzlement of public funds, you see bribery, you see things are not done the way they should be because those in government were busy pursuing their selfish interests. It encouraged the military. Another thing that encouraged the military is electoral malpractices and manipulation. Now we had incidents of malpractices that led to military intervention. Example, the first military rule has a bearing on electoral crisis, which malpractice was part of it. The military coup that also removed the second civilian government, that is 1983 military coup. If you remember, it has a bearing on the electoral crisis of 1983, which rigging and manipulation was rife in that election. Now we also have nepotism and open bias of government. We are talking about government doing things based on favor and not to actually promote the national interest. They want to service their party, they want to favor a particular person, they want to favor a particular group of people. And in the course of doing that, they were not pursuing the goal of the nation. Also, economic mismanagement. The military accused the civilian of mismanaging the economy. And they believe that the civilians should not continue to mismanage the economy. They were wasting public funds. They were mismanaging it. So because of that, they took over. Then disregard for rule of law on the part of the civilian. They fear that the civilians did not follow due process. They have no regard for the rule of law again. Then they also accuse another reason is that the civilians had problem of suppressing political opponents. We saw that during the crisis of 1964 general election, 1965 Western election. We saw these things. So this suppression of opposition was one of the things that led the military to take over power. Then we have the problem of abuse of fundamental human rights of citizens as one of the reasons. Then undue interference in the internal affairs of the military. The civilian government was unnecessarily and unduly interfering in the military, influencing the appointment, influencing promotions, influencing assignments of military, influencing things that are technically reserved for those in the military to take such decisions. So it's one of the problems they had with the civilians. Then turning blind eye on inflation and high cost of living by the civilian government. The cost of living was growing high, inflation was growing high, things were on the rise, and the prices, of course, the military felt that they are the saviors that will come and save the country from such situation. Then mass youth unemployment. The military felt the civilian has not done enough in getting the youth to be employed, and they feel that they are in the best position to normalize situation and give the youth the employment they deserve. Then weak and ineffective leadership. They also felt that the civilian government was weak and not effective enough in showing leadership, in attending to the national interest of the country. Then they felt that the civilians were inciting social and religious crisis in the country. We saw ethnicisms which were encouraged by the civilians. We saw some religious crisis encouraged by the civilian administration. Then also they believed that general insecurity and breakdown of law and order was so much in the civilian era. They also intervened because of the failure in addressing the military organizational grievances. The military, they had their own peculiar problem as an organization, and these problems that they had were not adequately addressed by the civilian government, and they feel that it is when they get to power that they will address and reorganize the military the way it should be organized. Then the civilian government, some of them were interfering with the media, so the military felt it was not democratic enough for civilian government to control the media or censor the press. Then violating the tenets of the constitution by the civilian government is one of the problems that led to the intervention of the military. Then government's failure to provide leadership in the provision of social and infrastructural facilities. We are talking about deficiency in infrastructural facilities like good roads, electricity, water, and the rest of them. The civilian government was not doing enough to actually provide all these things for the citizens. So the military felt that by interfering in the government, by intervention into the government, they'll provide these things for the citizens. And also, they accused the civilians for creating some paramilitary forces like Civil Defense Corps and the rest of them. So they feel that these forces were created to actually counter what the military was doing. And finally, most civilian government failed in their campaign promises. They promised heaven on earth, but at the end of the day, they can't achieve even up to 50% of what they have promised during their campaign. So these unfulfilled manifestos and campaign promises by the civilian administration made the military to regard them as failures, and therefore they should be ousted for the military to provide the right government for the state. So we have come to the end of this session. I wish you all the best in your examinations. Good luck.